Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, Paranormal Karen. You know I'm trying to get out of the habit of saying I'm so excited about my guest, but I am. And I know I say that a lot. Natalie Gray, I have been talking about forever. She has this great podcast, The Gray Experience.
The Gray Escape.
The Gray Escape. No,
but it was based on my experience,
okay.
kind of. So yeah, that makes sense.
And she, I don't even know where to start. We were talking before, and we're going to even start kind of in this esoteric thing about ideas, and then we're going to go into your near-death experience, which just blows my mind. Okay. So we were talking about ideas and how, in Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which most of my clients know you all have to get, and how ideas are sent to you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because my sort of theory is ideas are floating around us. Mm-hmm. I have never thought of it in terms of that they're sent, but I always think of us now as transistor radios. We're receiving, which I suppose means that something's sending something. But I've had lately a lot of like poetry coming to me, like pretty voluminous. Wow. And I will sit and just not censor myself, and these kind of fully formed poems are just coming out. And when I have time on the weekends and stuff, I've been turning them into songs, which has been incredibly soothing and just restorative. But yeah, I've even had experiences when I was in the UK, because of my experience, which I know we're going to get into. I'd heard of Philip K. Dick, who, is the guy behind many giant films, like The Matrix, I guess, being the most famous one. But I was thinking and talking about Philip K. Dick to my partner in the UK. We're walking along, and I felt like I walked through almost like an idea. And I walked along this old cobblestone little street in England, which there are many of, and I was just struck with this fully formed story. And it was so like a Philip K. Dick story. And I said to my partner, what do you think of this as an idea? And I reel off, and I can't even take credit for it because it was like it just came to me. And he's like, that's a really great story. Like, you should totally make a movie and write a screenplay about that. And I've got notes of it. But it was as though talking about Philip K. Dick manifested this kind of field of an idea that was in his vein, in his line of thinking. I'm not saying in any way Philip K. Dick was talking to me or communicating with me.
No, but I'm nodding so much because when anyone that reads Big Magic with Elizabeth Gilbert, she talks about a poet she talks about ideas many ways, but she talks about a poet that would be working out in the fields and she'd feel it coming and she'd run to the house and she'd grab the idea by the tail and try and get it in the house with her.
Yeah, and I get that.
All right, well, that's fabulous. We're already off and kicking, and my mind is already blown. And I didn't even introduce you. Also, comedian, writer. What else? What don't you do? That would be an easier list.
Gosh, I mean, I've had a bizarre life. I've had sort of several careers it's a bit like a basket weave that weaves in and out, and suddenly that's your life, is this web of careers and tasks that you're doing to earn a living. I was a shoe designer for many years, an artist, like a painter. I use the word artist now, but it took a long time to use that word. I painted from when I was a kid, and I sold my work from when I was 16 years old, and that was my livelihood while I was on TV and doing theater and stuff. So I had those two overlapping careers. And it was only when I basically went through a horrible depression in 2001 and was very, 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 very depressed. Like, I was really wanting to end it all. But the night before I decided I was going to end it all, and I wrote a suicide note, and I did my first abstract painting on the day I wrote my suicide note. I just finished a mural, so I was a muralist from painting.
An artist is a big word.
Yeah, like a painter,
a
painter. So I would say I was a painter, I was a muralist. I did spray painting from when I was very young. And I'd done a mural of the Sistine Chapel, a reproduction of the Sistine Chapel on Sunset Boulevard. It was a big job,
You just whipped it out, yeah.
It's 520 hours, which I always say Michelangelo took 520 days, but I had Starbucks. So the day that this ended, I'd been going through a breakup and lots of nasty stuff, like haunting nasty things from the past. Me Too kind of thing, let's just say. And the day I finished the mural, I had no more distraction anymore. So everything hit me with a ton of bricks, like the blackest, darkest depression. And I wrote a note, was going to end it all, but I had these really expensive paints left over from the mural. And I mean, I didn't want to waste those paints. The best paints I'd ever had in my whole life for this mural. So I was like, well, I'll blow out these paints. I'll smash them around. Then I'll do the deed. This was my logic,
Isn't this weird though? But and I agree with you when you say, I guess I wasn't, artist is a big word. It's like you think you need a reputation.
Yeah, it's pretentious.
Yes.
That's how I feel.
But I think it's good. But I think it's a good word. I think we're all artists.
We are. And now I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But until that time, when I'd gone through this horrible depression, I just was like, no, I'm a painter. I'm not an artist. I just paint.
Right.
I'm like a hired gun, literally, with my spray gun. People tell me something and I paint it. But then I got all these paints, went on my balcony and started smashing them around on the leftover canvas. Literally just doing abstract painting, which I had always made fun of. I mean, I full on declare myself, ignorant of fine art training. I thought abstract painting was for people who couldn't draw.
Right.
I thought it was like the cheater's way to become an artist was let's cough up a bunch of paint and people will be too embarrassed to call you on it.
Yeah.
Because that's how the fine art world works. Everybody's like, this is amazing. She's tapping into her darker side and the consciousness. And it's like, no, I was just depressed.
Yeah.
So, but I painted and I felt better. So I postponed the dirty deed till the next day. And I ended up being 30 days in my apartment and I painted 44 abstract canvases.
Wow.
And I was cured of my depression, fully no feelings of wanting to end my life. The art had somehow exorcised this horror out of me. And it really was very, very life-changing, tremendous. And that was 2001. And I had an art show only by people, word of mouth, synchronicity. I'd hid my paintings for a while thinking if people see these paintings, they're going to know, oh, she's off her rocker, this
Too
girl.
vulnerable.
Yeah, I was so vulnerable. And I thought the paintings look like, how do you describe if you do abstract painting? You don't know if it's good, because what's good?
Right.
When it's splodges of paint on canvas. And that's what it is. You don't know, how can you even judge that? Is that good? It's splodges of paint. So my splodges of paint, anyway, got put up in a solo show. And by sheer fluke, someone heard about me. Second biggest art buyer in the world came out from Miami, came to see my solo show. And despite being a stand-up comedian and doing live TV for years in Canada and stuff, my hand was shaking like a leaf because it was so raw. It was the rawest thing I'd ever shown anybody was these paintings because it was my pure desperate emotion.
And you felt like they could read that.
Oh, I felt it was my guts and emotions, my life smeared for all the world to see.
Wow.
And I use that word like smear because that's what it felt like. And my hand was shaking like a leaf. The risk of the judgment that this guy would come in, look at the paintings and somehow judge or deem them not worthy of whatever. I didn't even know what I was in for.
What an interesting thing to project.
Yeah, it was like me and my soul were about to be judged. And he came in and he goes, we're sending you a contract. I hope you like to travel. You're the next Jackson Pollock.
Nice.
And I got commissioned to do these paintings and then commissioned to more paintings. And so there was a big validation. And it was only during this dark, dark time that I really realized and understood the meaning of the word artist. So even though I'd painted since I was 16 years old, there was no tapping into a deep consciousness or some sort of soul level of who we are as human beings. and it had been so raw a place that these paintings came from. I was like, I get it. An artist is someone who literally taps that vein, as Julia Cameron would say, who I'm a fan of, who wrote The Artist's Way. And I use that expression a lot. Tap the vein is like your most painful, raw emotions. If you can be willing to make those visible, I feel that's when you've earned the stamp artist.
Nice.
You know.
Nice.
I've probably horribly digressed.
No, it's all fascinating. I know you. I could talk to you for hours. So we have so now this is where your life is going. So now continue.
So things really picked up then, and I became this, basically, I'd say in quotes, successful shoe designer. I got the fancy salary and all the perks. I was traveling the world non-stop for quite a few years. I mean, being a shoe designer, I have to say, is pretty awesome, because 4 times a year, there's major shifts in trends. You've got your fall, winter, summer, spring, and all this, that, and the other. Well, when you're designing, you have to literally chase the fashion is how it works. Now, I should preface this with saying, because of my little artistic leaning, I could always come up with stuff out of my head, which is why I got work very, very quickly as a designer. I could come up with batty ideas and people responded to them. My first shoe I ever designed had a hole in the toe and I called it the I'm broke shoe. I had like flat shoes and called them my boyfriend's short shoe. So comedy was leaking into shoe design. But you chase the fashion. Most designers chase fashion. So you're 4 times a year. It's like you fly to Dusseldorf for a trade show. You go Florence, Milan, Paris, London. Then you go off to Hong Kong for your last round of shopping, and then to China where everything's made. Well, that's like 4 times a year. So I was barely even in Los Angeles, and that was pretty awesome. And then while I was doing it, I still had this passion for comedy. So I was hired by Playboy to be their first ever shoe designer, which was quite a big honor. And I designed all of the shoes for Playboy for at least 8 years for the US and Canada. But I wanted to do comedy more. And my boss was like, look, we don't care. We love your shoes. They're selling. Just go on the road.
Do what you
do.
And
fax. And, this was when we're still like faxing and emailing your designs and stuff to the factory in China. So I literally was a road comic and a shoe designer at the same time, Let's see. And then how do we go on a winding way? I met my partner, Jason, like over 11 years ago now through stand-up comedy in a comedy show, in Dante's bowling alley comedy show. And we do like lots of comedy, write and produce a pilot. And in 2008, you remember when like everything crashed financially?
Uh-huh.
So I didn't have a financial crash. What happened to me is I'd had all these TV show ideas and I got a big kind of option thing happen with a major studio on one of my TV show ideas. And it was in development for a year. And one day, and I'd had 3 companies want this same TV show idea, which is still being shot now. That's how people still keep re-optioning this idea. Right. But I got this call after a year and they just casually said, we're just going to shelve it. And I was so crushed, in entertainment and in life, you go through disappointments.
Right.
But I do think in entertainment, because of the whole auditioning process, you're subjected to a much higher degree of disappointment.
And you're out on a limb all the time.
You're always putting yourself out there creatively and emotionally. And I was really gutted because it had been strung along for a year. So I decided I was leaving the entertainment industry behind. And this was 2010. And I opened a fine art gallery in Marina del Rey in the height of the recession. But I was like, I don't even care. Nobody has money, but they're going to buy fine art was my optimism. And it worked. And I only took a 2-year lease. And the gallery was successful to the point that the landlord, when my lease was up, he said, I'm not going to renew your lease because I'm going to open a gallery.
Oh, that's so funny.
So that took us to 2012, which is when then I suddenly was free of any, I was free of the gallery. And I said to my partner, we should just chill. Let's just chill. I've never chilled in my whole life. I worked from when I was 16 doing TV and art forever. I never took holidays when everyone else was off at camp. I was spray painting in Ottawa's Byward Market. And, and so we went and we stayed at a lovely place in Malibu. And we just chilled out and relaxed, and I painted. And this is where my experience happened in February 2012. And I thought, I learned afterwards actually that I guess Malibu's got some sort of energetic vortex to it that's somewhat sacred. Now all this would have sounded...
that's very interesting. No, but that would make sense.
Well, all this, if you'd have talked to me about this prior to February 2012, I hated this kind of talk. To me, I'm very logical. It was nonsense. Crystals, and of course I'd had a fine art gallery. We showcased over 200 artists who were walking in bedecked in crystals, and I'm like, okay, I'm helping you write your bio, and I'm just telling you now the word universe is out.
Yeah.
Anyone who comes in with a bio with the word universe, that's going, right? So that's where my head was. I had no tolerance for new age and crystals and this sort of thing. Everything changed February 2012 when I had this experience. And it stems really simply, because when you say near-death experience, people think, she fell off a cliff.
Right.
Mine was like the most boring looking near-death experience. It was like you could watch an episode of Seinfeld and it would be a more exciting near-death experience. Or as I like to say, a slow near-death experience, watching Dancing with the Stars. So I have had my whole life low blood pressure. Like I fainted quite a number of times. From the age of 10, it started, and my parents were like, oh my God, what's happened? She just drops down, all over the place. I would just like faint. Different experiences. And when I was 16, I had my first strange experience with like time and consciousness, but I didn't think much of it until later when something happened. And all that was, I had a sore knee. Because remember when aerobics was big?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we all killed our knees for the rest of our lives doing aerobics. So I get the sore knees, and I'm like 16 years old in my silly little Reebok Charismas, racking my joints. And I go to the doctor, and he starts describing the back of my kneecap. And he goes, oh yeah, it'll be rubbed raw like crab meat. Well, that visual for me
is sickening.
I fainted. Oh. So I'm sitting down. So I faint in a sitting down position, and I fall back I don't really actually remember like my physical thing. All I remember is suddenly becoming conscious again. But I'd had this giant, like what felt like 2 hours of experiences, like when you dream and it goes on and on. And I'd been here, I'd been there, and I said, oh, how long have I been out? And he goes, you literally leaned back in your chair and forward again.
Wow.
And I said, no, that couldn't be. I've been out like for a couple of hours. That's how much time has transpired for me. And he said, no, you blinked, fell back, and you leaned forward.
Wow.
So that was my first little hiccup. And weirdly, and I'm only just piecing this puzzle together now, I had very strange psychic things happening after that. And I've never tied them to this fainting thing. But when I was just shortly after that, there was a contest on the radio to win a trip to Florida. Now, I was, I guess, quite delusional, somehow thinking, I think I literally thought if you go to Disneyland, someone will discover you and put you in a movie because it's Disney. And I was British, so I mean, I'm like, I have this primitive view of what Hollywood is. So to me, as a Brit, I'm thinking, yeah, Orlando, Disneyland, movie executives probably roam around Disneyland. That's where they go. So I hear this contest on the radio in Ottawa, Canada, where my family had moved to. The contest takes place in a bar. I'm not even of drinking age yet, but I knew in a split second I was going to win the contest. I just knew I was going to win. And I had a boyfriend at the time, my boyfriend Tom, and I'm like, we need to go to this bar on such and such a night because they're running this contest. And it was a chain of bars all over Ottawa, multiple ones. They were running the contest in all of the bars together. And we go we have an argument because he basically didn't want to illegally go into a bar. But I was so sure we were going to win the contest. So we go in. They name 700 entries in Ottawa in the bar. Pick the name, Natalie Gray. And I'm just like, done, we can leave now. I knew I was going to win the contest.
Oh, that's great.
And that happened multiple times. So that was like a time thing. So back to 2012. I'd been to 2 doctors, funnily enough, again with a knee thing. And both doctors had said, your blood pressure is scary low. We don't even know how you're conscious.
Wow.
You need to be really careful when you stand up. It's called orthostatic hypertension.
Where
you black out.
Yeah, it happens a little bit in yoga.
Yes. Yeah. So I just had that like all my life. I thought it was normal that when you stood up, I would literally go kind of blind.
I had that. Yeah.
So anyway, within a period of 2 weeks, 2 doctors had said, your blood pressure is really scary low. So I'm within that 2-week period, sat in Malibu with 2 other people, and I'm sitting for a long time, which I've learned is not good when you have low blood pressure. So I'm sitting for a long time. It's warm. It's Malibu. It's beautiful. And I haven't had any fluids. I'm supposed to eat 3 teaspoons of salt a day. Well, I tend not to do that. I eat chips.
You know what? This is so weird, but I'm already learning because I go to yoga. Is this okay here?
Yeah.
And I do hot yoga every day, but I've always eaten so much salt and always had the low blood pressure.
Oh,
but I didn't know. And everybody's like, how can you eat so much salt? And I'm like, how can you not?
Yes. Well, to be honest with you, you'll see in all my new agey stuff behind you that I used to make fun of. There's little salt vials. And sometimes, because it goes kind of in phases, I keep a little salt vial in my purse of Himalayan salt and I'll grab granules because I'll feel that crash and I don't want to faint.
Right.
So all of a sudden I'm sat on this one sunny day in Malibu listening to 2 guys. I was with my partner and a very dear friend, and they're talking about cars, which they always do. So I tend to just tune out because cars aren't my thing. So I'm listening to them talk about Corvettes and everything, and I start to feel really nauseous. Now, I didn't know, but that's sort of like one of the things that happens when your blood pressure gets it's a warning sign. But I didn't know. I just thought, I'm
learning
sick.
so much because I have low blood pressure.
Here's things I can tell you in case I forget. Licorice, avocado, banana are all very good for balancing blood pressure.
That's so weird. I just lost a lot of weight on Weight Watchers, and I literally in a meditation, someone told me avocados. You need avocados. Every morning have an avocado.
Yes. So I have like a banana every day and I keep the salt stuff and licorice for candy to munch on. So I start to feel nauseous to the point, and I'm not a person who ever gets sick, like feeling like they're throwing up. Well, until recently, but that's another story. And no, I'm not pregnant. Okay. I just had an injury that resulted in me feeling nauseous. But up until that time. So it was unusual. And you think, I've ate something bad. And I said, I think I'm going to be sick. And I went to stand up and I was really woozy to the point that the guys grabbed me and were like, you want to go? And I thought I was going to be sick. So I'm like, take me to the bathroom. But as we're walking, I realized I wasn't even going to make it. I needed to lie down. And I said, I literally I don't even remember if I said lie down, I need to lie down, or if they just lay me down. But the next thing I knew, I was lying on the couch, ice cold. My teeth, and this is Malibu, a warm day in Malibu. My teeth were chattering as though I was standing out in snow, like proper chattering teeth. So my friend who's there gets this giant, beautiful, like blanket it's literally made of like animal skins and fur and stuff. Not that I endorse such a thing.
I know, crazy vegan,
but I was glad in the moment of it. It was like this Eskimo caliber blanket, and he puts it over me. And I think we all just thought, it was like I'd eaten something bad or something. So I'm lying there ice cold, and my partner, who is so lovely, I have this little dog, and he puts the little dog beside me to comfort me. And they didn't tell me till afterwards. I went a horrible color. But of course, everybody's still thinking they're probably it's food poisoning or something, So I'm lying there and they come in from outside to monitor me. And, you know, and I'm not saying, oh, I want to go to hospital or anything, because I'm just shivering. I'm not aware that my blood pressure has crashed and that it's actually very likely dangerous. So I'm lying there and all of a sudden my body disappears from my vision, but my eyes are open. I'm still conscious and aware and very cognizant. I'm not feeling like drunk or anything like that. I'm very, almost like pretty clear-headed. And I look down and I've got no body, but I look over what would be my shoulder and I see my, you know, the two guys sat on the couch talking about cars, sat behind me, which was very reassuring. And I liken it to the way that when we used to have VHS cassettes, you know how you could record to the point, if you over-recorded so much, there'd be an image behind.
Yeah.
And it sort of felt like, the feeling was like that I was seeing the original image.
Seeing through
behind,
dimensions, sort of.
Yeah. And that when I look over my shoulder, I was seeing the new recording that you'd have over your VHS. But when I looked in front of me, that was the real thing. And what I was looking at, which was so incredible, it was all blackness. And I wasn't afraid in any way. I felt so just neutral and safe and comfortable. Was this flawless grid of energy balls. Like so perfectly aligned. I remember having this sense of this must have been designed by a computer because they're so flawlessly aligned and there was no lines between them. And for listeners, I guess I'll do my best to describe it.
And when you say, so it's pitch black, but,
yes.
But you can see the energy balls?
So like the background, it's like the background's outer space. It's like set against blackness.
Okay.
Within this outer space environment are these energy balls, and they're pretty big. And I'm holding now my hands.
They're about a foot big. They're a ruler big.
So I can't tell you they were that big because I didn't have a sense of proximity.
Oh, okay.
I could have been like, 100. I didn't feel like I was that far, but I couldn't put an accurate measurement because space had a different feeling. Because when you don't have a body, how do you compare size? There was nothing relative to say, well, it was about the size of my leg.
So they could have been tiny.
They could have been tiny, or they could have been the size of our planet.
And could you see through them or no? But you just sensed they were energy
I
balls.
can describe them. They had an energetic movement to the point that I would say they were clear, but because of the movement and activity of the energy, there was a refraction going on. So you couldn't see through them. So although I had the sense that they were made of energy, the actual energetic activity was making like a mirror watery effect. So I couldn't see through them, but I just felt they were energy.
Is that what we would picture an atom?
It could have been an atom. Like I still continue to research this. And funnily enough, that's what led me to crystals that I used to make so much fun of. I spent after this experience, which we haven't even got to me, the best part, the real meat of it. But I spent 16 months after this intensely researching. I was obsessively researching this. And one of the elements was, what did I see? This lattice grid of energy balls, flawlessly aligned, and me within them. And they're just all, everything was a feeling and a sense. It was like it bypassed my thinking brain. So you'll probably hear me say, I had the sense. That was how all the information was coming to me. The intelligence was a feeling, and I touch my tummy a lot as though it's intelligence, but I really instinctively feel now we have a lot of intelligence in our body and a lot of perception in our body. That's why we use phrases like gut feeling.
I just had this conversation with someone I was reading for who couldn't understand why her gut is there, and we're gonna do it really quick. I got sponsors. I got awesome sponsors.
Do your sponsors.
Yeah, here we go, folks. And folks, I know I didn't have ads before, but they're funding the podcast. Listen in and buy these great products. Who do tarot readers go for tarot readings? They go to Melissa Sonova at melissasonova.com. She gave me the best reading a couple of months ago that is still resonating and helping me out now. She is authentic and to the point. You loved her on the podcast. She is the no BS tarot reader. She also has a tarot class online right now. Check it out. Just watching the promo, you will see how much fun you are going to have while you learn. Also, check out her book, which is always right beside me when I'm doing my readings or my tarot card for me in the morning. It is called Kitchen Table Tarot, and you will love it. Melissa Sonova, that's MELISSACYNOVA. Check her out. Okay, so, all right. So
to deviate, before I tell more of the juicy part of the experience, besides my body disappearing, which is fairly juicy, is that, so what I discovered in my research, and I went very scientific on the research. This
is reflected in your podcast.
Oh yeah. My podcast. I've interviewed sound scientists. So many people to do with my experience, as well as comedians. Yeah. It's like physics and dick jokes, right? There you go. So I find that crystals have a flawlessly aligned molecular structure. And that's what started my interest in crystals, is that they have this never-ending pattern, like a fractal. So, you know, a fractal where every part contains the whole kind of thing, like a holographic is the same thing, which I also studied. Every part of a holographic image contains the whole entire image. And
okay. Now, did you know this about crystals because now you see it, or you?
I research. Okay. So I'm I'm ferociously researching science, and I'm Googling to bits lattice grid energy balls, and I start to find lattice grid imagery of crystals that are exactly aligned with what I saw, you know. While I'm Googling all the stuff, which I'm probably doing it backwards because I'm telling you about my research before I tell you the experience, but what I discovered was that other people had the same thing happen during near-death experiences. So, getting back to the experience.
And I'm going to keep forcing you into the corner, the metaphysical corner.
Go for it. No, you can force me in. Trust me, I'm comfortable in all corners now.
Oh, good. You know? So, and now when you handle crystals, do you feel what other people feel, or do you feel there's something to them, or they assist us?
I do feel there's something to crystals. I do. And in fact, I have pending, I've already recorded them. They're not posted. You're going to love this. I interviewed Judy Hall.
Oh.
Yes, who is the world-renowned author of the Crystal Bible. That's how far I've come, Karen. I would be making fun of Judy Hall, and now I have what's going to be a 3-episode interview that took place in London at the College of Psychic Studies.
Yes.
Where I spent a year, you know.
I'm all over that.
Yeah,
I'm on the email. I'm going to take
talk about life-changing. So here I am, lying on the couch, freezing, teeth chattering. My body's disappeared. I'm seeing this flawless grid of energy balls, which all have a light, bright green halo around them, you know, which who knows where that comes about. My lovely friend Charisse Bangs, who's on one of my podcasts, she teaches yoga. She's one of the most holistic people you could ever meet. And she said the green color is love. So she said, it's love.
Well, that's our heart chakra screen.
Yeah. So
I always thought it was pink. Damn, I've been loving the wrong things.
Damn. So here I am, and here's where it gets really freaky. I sit up, kind of lean up from lying down. I lean up in the couch, and I start speaking scientific information. And I have had no background in science, nor interest in science. I've been full on arts. It's been for me drama, like acting, painting, TV, that side of things, nothing to do with
So
science.
When you say science,
my opening sentence, and everything came out with no ums and ahs, and I just am so grateful that I had two people in the room with me as witnesses, because if I didn't, I would have never been able to tell anybody, because I don't think people would believe me. It would take someone like you to believe me.
Right.
But the majority of people would not believe me. But I had two normal people in the room with me, neither of whom were into crystals, you know. My first line that just comes out, matter of fact, and it's coming through me as though I'm just a transistor radio with a vocal cords. Everything is an illusion. It is all our perception of an infinite range of frequencies and vibrations.
I'm in.
Yeah, you and every physicist on the planet and the people at NASA, you know. I carried on like this for, I believe, about 45 minutes. And it was stuff that I would have just never, ever had any knowledge of, or, I mean, I've never sat in on science classes, you know. And I talked about things like evolution, how our bodies are in fact tremendously primitive, and that we're actually behind where we're supposed to be in evolution. We are supposed to already be able to communicate this, and I'm saying this remembering what I said. So I'm not saying it as Natalie now. I'm saying this is what I said on the couch in 2012. So judge as you may, I'm just repeating my experience now. So I said, we should be further along. We're already supposed to be where we can communicate telepathically, but we're behind. Our bodies are primitive. Our consciousness is primitive. It's evolving, but we're not where we're supposed to be. Our ears are almost deaf with what we hear on the spectrum of audio waves. Our eyes are almost blind of what we see on the, you know, the spectrum, or the spectrum of waves. We see a small sliver of waves that we call visible light. NASA has something on their website, because I was researching the science, as I said. If you look at the length of the spectrum of all the waves, what we see is the thickness of a soap bubble. If you judged our vision by this scientific manner of what else is available that we're not seeing, you would deem us legally blind.
This is why I tripped down the stairs.
Why you trip down the stairs.
This is also, you watch the evolution of ghost hunting equipment, and this is where it goes. It goes to the all-spec camera. They're pulling it, they're making it bigger and bigger, like a cat's eye, so they can see that.
Right. So, a very significant part of the information that comes to me, very deeply I felt. All of this I felt so deeply, and the best description I can give you is how I felt, because it was all a feeling. It was like neck down information and then my mouth talking to reveal. But it didn't feel like my head was involved. It was coming through me. I felt like I'd been given a keyhole to the real way that the universe works. I felt like I was being given a privileged peek through the keyhole of the truth. That was the feeling of it. So the other messages that I was saying that really just resonated through me was sound can heal everything. And I felt it so strongly that even in the experience, I was talking in a way of like, but you don't understand, it can heal anything. Sound can heal anything. So I'm saying this not even knowing how sound can do it. The information is just coming to me. And then I said this phrase, music is the key, which I'm fairly sure it came up in my research that this was one of those quotes that John Lennon said at some point, was music is the key. And I didn't know what it meant, but I felt, and the biggest takeaway from the experience was this sound can heal everything. After the experience, so basically suddenly I start warming up after this period of time.
And I have to, were you the one that told me the quote that we have misdiagnosed schizophrenia?
Yes. Well, and again, I'm going to tell you what happened. What happened after the experience is I started to get these downloads between 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning. My partner can vouch for this, and I had to keep Post-it notes by the bed. And it was like I literally would wake up between 3 and 4 a.m. and there would just be information that I had to write down. I wasn't kind of recalling it in the moment. It was like, here it is. It was like a dump of information. One of them was about the alphabet and how the alphabet is so much more powerful than we even realize. Symbols are so much more powerful than we even realize. So that was like one night's post-it note. Next night's post-it note, we're totally misreading schizophrenia, people that we see. And I'm not saying everybody. And again, I'm reminding, this is at the time, this was the download of information. So this isn't Natalie talking. This is what information is coming through the radio, so to speak. The broadcast was, people who have schizophrenia are the more evolved people. They're ahead of us in their perception, and we're just not caught up to them in what they can perceive on all these spectrums of things. And, you know, I didn't have anybody to speak to about this stuff because, let's face it, to most people, this sounds nuts, including to myself.
Well, and in my house, I call my friends and go, I just found out I have alien DNA. So just so you know who you're talking to. So just, you don't, and my listeners know this is how I am. So be you.
Well, great.
Or that,
okay,
whatever.
Great. So the person who's super open-minded in my family is my brother. So I call my brother and I literally, he picks up the phone and I say, we're misdiagnosing schizophrenic people. And he goes, I just listened to a show with David Icke, and he just said word for word, however I had worded it, we're misdiagnosing the schizophrenic people. They actually have a greater perception than us, and we should be studying them in a different way than we are. So I'd never heard of David Icke at the time. And I say to my brother, well, who's this guy, David Icke? And he said, oh, well, he's just somebody who has a lot of alternative theories. It's not mainstream media. And my brother, I really take my hat off to him. He exposes himself to a wide variety of information, which I really admire.
And the schizophrenia thing, that's very funny about that, because I know ghosts, you know, my paranormal all seems to, I have two questions for this, seems to wrap over, because I know people that have worked in mental hospitals, and the guy, he was an attendant, and he saw a ghost in the corner, and then the ghost disappeared, and he jumped back, and the guy that had schizophrenia goes, you saw him, right? You saw him. And it's almost to go, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
And also, 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, I don't always buy, I'm kind of on the fence about the theory. Ghost hunters are always like, that's the devil's hour, because Christ died at 3:30, that 3:33 a.m. Is the exact opposite of p.m., but I'm not positive on that. I feel kind of funky about that information, but I do feel like the veil is thinner 3 to 4 a.m. Is that?
Well, yes. Again, I go with the science side of it, that I believe when we're in our deepest sleep there's some brainwave, and I don't know if it's the theta, the beta, or, you know, there's some brainwave that when I started to research, because we are going back a few years now, but it became very clear this is when, if you're going to receive information, this was the optimal time. It was between 3 and 4 o'clock that your brain has this heightened perception.
So when people are waking up at that time, maybe they're overloaded, or they, you know, a lot. I wake up a lot in that hour.
Maybe they're waking up because they're supposed to be perceiving some message.
Oh, they're supposed to be writing something down.
Maybe. I had one of my other messages that was to do with time, and this was where it was interesting because of the experience I had at 16 with time. And I had seen visuals in my experience in Malibu. I saw visuals. It was as though I was on a crash course in how things work in the universe. And as though you would have a PowerPoint given by the universe. It kind of felt like that. I was shown images. And one of them was, you know, when we would look at an equalizer for a song, and you know, probably more old like Walkmans and stuff like that we would have, where you'd have that green line with all the points, right, for the song. So that's what I was shown, with the message that our time is altered with our perception. And in fact, our lifetime is so quick, it won't even show on one of these spikes for a single song. An entire civilization might be a spike or a spike and a half on one spike of a song frequency that you're looking at, which has like thousands, I'm assuming, of spikes in one of those EQ models that you look at. So our time was distorted. So that was shown to me in the experience.
This is where, okay, so you're going to be science girl and I'm going to be a crazy girl.
You be ghost girl.
Well, I was late on my way to Comedy and Magic the other day. And the other comic in the seat with me goes, my friend's a witch and she taught me how to expand time.
Oh.
And he was like, stay calm. And it was like, there was this whole thing about just, I can't even remember how he did it, but he's like, we're going to slow down time. And we made it. So it's a good story. I can't remember the whole thing, but this is very fascinating.
My favorite part of what you just said is the stay calm.
Yeah.
We're going to expand time. Stay calm.
Yeah, you never. We did this over with. Everyone panicked.
Right. Stay calm.
I once had an EVP, and this is again. This all is. I guess ghost hunting is more on the level I'm thinking. I walked in. We were in South Carolina. No one had ever investigated there, and you put the sound thing. That's when you can see the sound waves. Walk on with my recorder on, and she says, it's an Italian word, but it turned out to be a name of slaves. I'm going to say Avalon. It was like Avalon. And I put it up on the board. This is in South Carolina on an island. There's no electricity, nothing. And it bows the line. The line, how, there's a straight line and it goes like this across the line. Yeah. The line bows. Oh. Like it moves off, like the stationary line bows up off the thing as she says it. And I talked to someone, a musician, that said in old times before all our electricity was measured, like how now you have that thing.
Yes.
They would call that DC overload or something.
Okay.
Where it would be like if the musician was in their house with the refrigerator running and then had all the equipment on, it'd blow that line up because there was such a surge of power.
Right.
So I don't know if this applies to what we're talking about, but it stuck in my head.
I'm like just stuck on how to expand time. I'm like, don't forget to ask Karen how to expand time.
I know. I'll find that out. And
that
I'll
sounds
get that
so useful.
I know.
Now, let's see. Where were we?
So you were talking about our time. That was one.
Oh, yeah. So when these downloads that went on for several days after the experience, this was one of the side effects of the near-death experience, which I learned, again, other people had this happen. One of them, I got more visuals. And this time, instead of seeing the equalizer graph, I was shown a little droplet of water going into still flat water, but the ripples moved tremendously slowly. And the message was just, again, time isn't what we think it is. We're living in distorted or artificial, or our perception is altered from what time actually is. And I want to point out as well that this was so serious to me, my research. I didn't so much, after my experience, I didn't so much as have a glass of wine, because it felt like I needed my body to be so pure so that I knew that everything was going on was really real, that I could never say, oh, well, I was tipsy, I had a glass of wine or something. Okay. So all of these downloads that happened in the middle of the night, I hadn't had anything that you would say, oh, well, maybe she was having like a hangover or anything like I kept my body really pure, and instinctively I wanted to do that, fruits and juices and stuff like this. So I got the downloads of information. Another weird thing that was happening after the experience, I was blowing out electrical things just with my presence. Tons of stuff. I mean, like, I'd say probably half of the light bulbs in my home blew out. Hard drive blew, sat in my car, battery died. My cell phone, weird stuff was going on. People couldn't hear me talking on my cell phone, but I could pass it to my partner and they could hear him. I mean, what's that about? I mean, this is how even my landline, I still had a landline at that time. Now I just got a cell phone, but then I had a landline. Even my landline wouldn't work for me, but it would work for my partner. Like, everything was malfunctioning around me.
You were at such a high vibration.
I guess, whatever it was, or I was giving off some kind of electrical charge. I had to go into Verizon. I couldn't even call Verizon because people couldn't hear me on the phone. So I go into Verizon and I'm like, okay, people can't hear me on the phone, but they can hear my partner. What is going on? And they do this thing on my phone, whatever it is, but they say, we've never seen this before with an iPhone. We've never seen this, but they fixed it for me. And they said that is an anomaly. And there was something visible that they were able to see with the phone to go, because it wasn't just me telling them. They did some test on the phone and they went, that's weird. Never seen that before,
Saw that. All right.
Anyway, it got fixed. And that only lasted, fortunately, I think about 5 days, the blowing out of electrical current. Here's the cool bit, which does defy science a little bit. I was struck psychic, extremely psychic for about 5 months until I went back to the UK. I was like wickedly able to answer questions, random questions from people. And I had this little technique down. You could say to me, like, is there anything wrong with my body? And I would sit, and just for a few seconds, I could let my eyes just softly focus as though I was gazing into the distance, and I would see an image, and I'm thinking one of my friends specifically with this. And I saw, somebody doing little leg lifts with their knee, bending their knee frantically up and down and up and down and up and down. And he's like, oh, she's got to have knee surgery. And I knew nothing. I didn't even know he had a sister till he said, just what can you tell me about my sister? And I saw this girl sat madly lifting her knee up and down. So it was very, very specific. Tons of synchronicities happened. So many freaky synchronicities.
Do you have a theory on the synchronicities? Because people ask me about that all the time, and I just think it means you're where you're supposed to be or something. It's like him mentioning you can expand time, and then I sit down with you.
Yes.
That's a synchronicity.
Yeah. Well, I believe my personal Natalie theory on synchronicity, how I feel it's very good when you have synchronicity in your life. And I feel that you're supposed to pay attention to it. They're like markers, checkpoints. And if you have a synchronicity, it's like a little flag going up going, yep, whatever you're doing now, that's however you're feeling right now, whatever you're doing, keep doing that because you're now on your right path that you're supposed to be on, If
I'm supposed to be on the time expanding path, I'm on it now.
Boom. Yeah, if that's what you want to be on, a time expanding path.
Hey, you guys, looking for a great book? Never Give In to Fear, Laughing All the Way Up from Rock Bottom is the National Indie Excellence Award winner. This critically acclaimed, funny and dramatic memoir describes an emerging stand-up comic's drug-fueled descent into the underworld, escape from human traffickers, homelessness, and ultimate redemption. I promise you guys, this is going to be a movie someday. It's one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. And after I read the book, I bought 20 copies and I sent it to my friends who then bought 20 copies and sent it to their friends. And if you have not yet karmically received your copy, go to martymac.com and order Never Give In to Fear. I cannot say enough things. You guys know. I don't read. I read this book. I picked it up. I could not put it down. Never Give In to Fear, Laughing All the Way Up from Rock Bottom at martymac.com. MARTIMAC.com. So synchronicities are good. Do you ever have, in all this psychic stuff, I tend to have an ear go out. Like, I think somebody's trying to tell me something. Like, this ear will go out as though I've been swimming and it's full of water. It'll just go out. And that's when I stop and I go, who's trying to talk to me?
Oh, that's interesting. I had one experience with an ear where I remember being in England and just, I've never been the ghosty sort of a person. And I remember thinking, it was actually about angels, because again, I don't deem myself religious. I'm spiritual now and certainly very respectful of beliefs, and I definitely believe in something. I hate assigning a name to it because I believe that results in a lot of conflict between people, when in fact there could be this omnipresent intelligence that everybody's actually kind of praying to the same thing. They're praying, but somebody's calling it Al and somebody's calling it Terry, and then they're arguing over, but it's the guy.
It's like tacos
the girl,
and burritos. They're the same thing. They're just wrapped differently.
Right. But I definitely, especially now, I'm definitely a believer in a field, a force much bigger than ourselves. in which we emanate, to kind of quote George Lucas, who I think was way ahead of his time. Because as I was never into Star Wars, but as I was doing my research, my partner and friend would be like, George Lucas says that. You're quoting Star Wars. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm quoting science. I'm not a Star Wars person. And they're like, that's what George Lucas says. Because I'm literally researching a field, the energetic field.
And that's the idea coming through him. That's the idea that came through him. And that's why that simple story, which it was, Star Wars was a simple story that resonated with everyone, because I believe it was information people were supposed to get.
In all fairness, and I believe he openly talks about this, he also did get the story from some samurai movie.
Oh, so maybe the samurai got it first.
Yeah, he was very big into these sort of samurai movies.
And it is true. We go back to a lot of, and we talk Spirit Emergency, we talk about a book called The Writer's Journey, which I read that and I go, that's the tarot, that's the Fool's Journey. So it's all connected.
Oh, I have that book and I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. Excellent.
Because I don't want to, I know you want my juicy details of the experience.
I don't know what's juicy or not, but you've been amazing from the beginning.
So the synchronicities, though, here's the kind of thing that would happen. For a period of about 5 months after the near-death experience, I felt a very distinct correlation between what I was thinking and what would then happen around me. I really was aware, almost to the point of having to be careful what I was thinking. My thoughts became very powerful. So one morning, shortly after the experience, I was putting body lotion on after getting out of the shower, and I suddenly had this totally different perception and awareness in life. And I'm like, what am I putting on? We do so many things autonomously without question. We buy these things off a shelf. We don't know what chemicals. We trust because it's a brand. We put it on our body. It's to our liver within 15 seconds. And if that intrigues you, listen to my episodes on Aura Soma, which is this wonderful stuff from the UK, very holistic. So I thought, I don't want to put this body lotion. I need something that I can put on my body that's pure and natural. I go a walk outside of where I live at the time in Marina del Rey, and this total stranger comes up to me and she introduces herself by name, reaches out her hand, and she initially was drawn from a quote I was wearing on my t-shirt. She told me off because it said, LA don't love me. And she comes up and she goes, you shouldn't wear something negative like that.
Wow.
Yeah, very kind of cocky. But she reaches her hand, says her name, and she goes, I make holistic body lotion. It's all natural with nothing in it. It's even blessed with prayer. And I had just 5 minutes before thought, I need to find a body lotion that's all natural.
I have to ask you, do you still know this woman? Because I feel like that wasn't a human that came and did that.
I can tell you the name of her.
Oh, she's still around?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I feel I'm always conscious of people's privacy. I don't want to.
Oh, yes, let you know. But I'm glad you know
yeah.
that, because I'm kind of like, I think that was something else. Well, okay. So.
But there's more. So I would be walking around the marina, and here's another one. And my brother, again, who was only him, really, him and my partner who'd witnessed the incident could talk about. And my brother was like, he was listening to a lot of David Icke, and he goes, you want to be aware of yearnings you have to go places. He goes like, David Icke had an experience on ayahuasca, and he needed to go to Peru and do all this certain stuff. And I said to my partner, gosh, I feel this draw to Tibetan monks, and to just sit and be quiet in Tibet. Sounded really amazing. And we turned the corner, and the Dalai Lama was standing on Fisherman's Wharf, surrounded by Tibetan monks.
Wow.
And it started to become spooky. And here's why. I was doing a lot of stand-up comedy at the time. And I would, how I don't know if you feel this, but I used to feel it a lot, where I'd book a show and then I'd regret booking the show. And when the night, because I'm a homebody and I've got pets and I love being at home. And the show night would come and I'd think, oh God, why did I book this show? I could drive to Anaheim or something, All of the things that I was booking, when the night would come around, shows were getting cancelled. But it was a more than coincidence. Like every show that I was supposed to be doing would be cancelled. And when I realized, I have to be careful, and my partner said, you got to be careful. And this sounds, I mean, I'm aware, by the way, that this sounds nuts. I just want you to know that I am very aware enough to know that this sounds nuts.
You're in the right company here. You're in the right company here. So please, we just want to hear what you have to say.
So this one night in particular, I'd said to my partner, I got this show. I can't even remember, like Culver City or something. And I'm like, I don't even want to go. Why did I book this show? And shows, they're always such a weird locations, comedy shows where we go.
And now they're in breweries, which means they're in like warehouses, and you're driving. You're like, am I being kidnapped? Why am I being?
My God, I should take that off. Sorry, okay. I'm taking off my jacket that has the microphone. Okay.
We'll just redo.
Okay, hang on. Let me just move it. So, it was somewhere, and I just was, especially after my experience, I was so obsessed with science and research. It's all I wanted to do was research. I was spending like hours and hours a day reading, watching documentaries, listening to interviews with physicists and scientists. I was very obsessed with the research of all this information and sound healing and everything. So I think to myself, oh God, I wish I didn't have to do that show. And like within about 30 seconds, I get this text off a comedy booker. It actually wasn't 30 seconds. It's probably more like 30 minutes. She goes, I just had, about 30 minutes ago, I've had a car accident, a fender bender, and the show's cancelled. And because so many shows had been cancelled, I really started to think, I've got to be careful. Like, something's going on here. I'm thinking stuff and it's happening. And I know that sounds mental, but that really was what was happening. I would think something and it would happen. I would think of somebody, they would phone. I had these dreams that were lucid and really freaky stuff happened. And here's one that's a bit ghosty. When I was in Malibu, I woke up in the middle of the night. The radio in the room was going off. And it was one of those, remember how American DJs used to talk, I guess in like the 1940s and 50s. And there was that pattern, that melody of the voice. It was the voice of a DJ sounding like, with all the static, like an old radio coming through the radio. I mean, my heart literally was coming out of my mouth. I was so afraid. And my partner wakes up and I'm like, I was just terrified. Absolutely terrified.
Were you terrified for a second you were going to wake up in the wrong time?
No, the radio, the fact a voice was coming, the radio had turned itself on, was freaking me out. But it gets freakier. The next morning, because it freaked my partner out too, the next morning we go and look and it was one of those Bose radios, not some old fashioned thing. It was like a decent Bose, whatever you call those sound things. It wasn't plugged in.
Oh.
We plug it in and it's not even on a channel and it's just on snow. It's not even tuned to any kind of station. That was very, very freaky.
See, that's my kind of stuff. I used to live in a house that was so haunted, and I loved talk radio, and I literally had 2 different stations on 2 radios, because I didn't, on the middle of the night, I wouldn't want to listen to that one. Morning, I want to listen to this one. And one time in the middle of the night, this one goes off, and it's got a real horrid, like demonic voice, and I turn it off, and I turn on the one that's on the other station. Same voice.
Ooh,
turn them both off.
That's so
they were on. Yeah, that's weird. But and radio is an automatic transmitter for these things. Okay, so go ahead. I interrupt.
I mean, there's just more of these strange things I was just like,
that feels like just a reminder that this is not real. That's all that was going on, is something was reminding you that this is not the reality.
For me, my sense of it was just how everything's frequencies and vibrations, and if they get mucked up, weird things can happen.
No.
And the sound, to go back to the biggest, for me, most profound messages of the experience with music is the key. Sound can heal everything. I threw myself into sound healing. So I spent a big part of the next 5 years in the UK and I was studying sound healing. And I literally went to Glastonbury with sound expert Tony Neck, who's on my podcast at NEC, Tony Neck. He's wonderful. And I did his singing bowl healing.
Oh, I
witnessed with my own eyes. And we're going, because when you talk about frequencies and vibrations, to me, I'm coming at it from a scientific, measurable way. we had tuning forks, so you can knock tuning forks. Well, you hear the sound of them. So we're immediately listening. We are judging something. We can hear something. We would have people in his class lie down, and we were taught how you diagnose people with sound frequencies. So you could take tuning forks. You could lie down right now, for example.
I've had this done.
Oh, you have? Okay. I don't want to use you because I don't want to put onto you this cast that you're ill. So let's say we have someone here and she lies down. You clink the tuning forks and you very slowly, like a baton, move it along their body, like 4 or 5 inches above their body. The sound changes where they're not well. And we did this in class, and we would do it with people that we didn't know, and the teacher would demonstrate, and we would all hear it. He'd do the singing bowl, and it would make this wonderful ooh sound.
I use those in my Reiki, yeah.
He'd move it over the body, and he'd get to a certain point, and suddenly there'd be this dissonant tone to it, and it would go off. And then the person, that we had, these volunteers kind of would say, yeah, I've got something wrong with my right kidney, blah, blah, blah. And he showed us how you rebalance the body and all this. And I got very into tuning forks, which I believe are very powerful. And again, leading into music, because of course sound and music, they kind of hold each other's hand. Do you know anything about music and intervals? Do you play any instruments?
I know a little bit, but I have to throw this in because I know that my friend Jen Durant and my demonologist Thomas Durant.
You have a demonologist.
Oh,
who doesn't? It's like, that's so Beverly Hills Housewife, my demonologist.
I know. And he is finishing a documentary on sound healing.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
Tommy, we're going to have you back on when that's time. But also Jen has done tuning forks on me.
Oh, right. Yes.
And,
yes.
Yes. And also, what was I going to ask you in there? The singing bowl is fabulous. Okay. It slipped my mind. So yes, I know about music and timing.
The tie-in with the sound, as I learned during my 18, and I still continue to research. And I mean, I have had a hiatus on my podcast, but I'm back now. But I've had people going always as much as possible with the science side. I've had a sound scientist, John Stewart Reed, who is a leading global expert in cymatics, which is the study of making sound visible. They take metal plate with sand, they play a sound frequency.
I've seen that.
Yes, and it animates into a shape. It literally shows how sound creates matter. Pierre Rubesser is another sound scientist. He's created a gadget, for a better word, in Switzerland that heals people with sound waves, and it's been approved by the Swiss government.
Wow.
So sound healing is huge.
If we could work these into facelifts, we'd be millionaires.
They do tuning fork facelifts.
No.
Yes, you can Google. I've never had one, nor have I tried it, but there are people hawking tuning fork facelift. But we happen to have a piano keyboard right by us.
Play
I won't play it, but just to illustrate that I'd play it if it was plugged in for sound. But
I know you can light that up with your vibration. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I was going to show you on the keyboard. Everybody knows what piano looks like. The fifth, simply, if you start on one note and you go up 5 notes, is the fifth in the scale of C, for example. I can do it with my voice. Like do, re, mi, fa, so. So if I go do, re, mi, fa, so, you go so, do. That's the fifth. That interval is the space between musical sounds or between frequencies. The interval of a musical fifth is especially powerful. And it has been proven with blood tests that when you play tuning forks that are 1/5 apart and treat somebody's body, their blood gives off like nitric oxide that goes through and cleans your blood out.
Wow.
It's really healthy for the heart. It takes all the clutter out your bloodstream, cleaning up arteries, and it's really good for you.
There's and moving back here, this is something that people should be aware of, and I have a water filter that does it, but talk about crap in your body. We have so much fluoride in our water, and that is the worst thing. that calcifies the pineal gland. But when you were talking about lotion and stuff, I wanted to throw that in, that I think that's another thing then we'll get into conspiracies. The government's keeping us dumb with fluoride.
That is a big theory. And I'm always very careful what I say on conspiracy. You are not, which is excellent, which is why we are so destined to work together one day on some show.
I know.
I like to go as much as possible. I try and go with facts because my experience was so bizarre and I never would have believed it possible. And so I desperately, probably for the rest of my life, will now work to support it with science.
And I'm a captain in the Orion Alien Army, so go ahead.
Excellent, Karen. Excellent. Allow me to be your cadet. Well, coming from a physics standpoint, everything is a frequency and a vibration. Now, this is what I think a lot of people don't realize. My big first opening line of my experience was everything is an illusion. I knew with every part of my being, because at this point I didn't have a body, I was just some being, I felt that it was the truth. So I still to this day feel this sentiment, everything is an illusion. So I throw myself into researching frequencies and vibrations, and I learn there is no such thing as solid matter. That what they thought was an atom, when it was like, hey, we found the atom with electrons and neutrons and the diagram with all the spinny lines and stuff. Then they get more powerful microscopes like the atomic microscope, and they can go in, and the more they go in and they find nothing solid. When you get to these the tiniest things,
it's still space.
With crazy tiny measurements with scientific names for how tiny they are. They're parcels of energy. That's what forms what we used to think was solid matter, is in fact, when you keep zooming in, it's parcels of energy. Well, not only are those parcels of energy never still, they're moving all the time. They're coming into and out of existence. So, and I never know the correct pronunciation of this guy's name, but he's one of my favorite physicists because he's got a great personality. Michio Kaku.
Oh, Michio Kaku,
yes.
Yeah. I used to call my boyfriend Kaku, because when he was gone, I'd say Michio Kaku.
That's adorable and so perfectly placed in this podcast. How many opportunities do you have to tell that little anecdote?
You can tell my blood pressure's getting lower.
Yes. I hope not. We can stop anytime if you're
Mishukaku, yes.
You can chip into my salt stash over there if you want. So, but he says, and many scientists and physicists now, it's like if you've got parcels of energy that are going into and out of existence, it begs the question of alternate realities, so this is another thing that started to come into the foreground of my research.
And do you believe I believe these parcels of energy might have been the energy balls you saw?
I don't know. That doesn't feel correct.
Doesn't feel in your gut?
No. John Stewart Reed, when I met with him he has a science lab that's really awesome in the Lake District in England. And I drove hours in the UK to interview him. And I was so excited. And he's wonderful. For people, check out that podcast interview, The Secrets of Sound. His information is astonishing. I mean, we're talking sarcophaguses in the pyramids with information, vibrations coming from sarcophagus. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. But this guy, when I told him and described the flawless grid of energy balls and all the information and how everything's sound and sound can heal anything, he was so accepting of everything I said. In a way, as though I were a scientist colleague of his. He was just like, yes, absolutely. He didn't deny or refute. He embraced everything that I said and very matter-of-factly said to me, and I actually have a recording of him saying, I believe you saw the very fabric of space and time. That's what he said. That's his theory. I still don't have a theory. My dad thinks I've seen other universes. He thinks every energy ball was its own universe because he's a sci-fi guy. He's a Star Trek guy.
Interesting.
I don't have a theory locked down on what I saw, and that's why my research is still ongoing. I continue to have people on my podcast. I just had a lady who deals with artificial intelligence, and we talked about frequencies and vibrations and stuff. Did you have any questions? Or do we have to wrap up?
I don't want to wrap up.
How strict are you on your pod time?
I like to keep it an hour, but this is exceptional. So I don't know if I should break it into, but also I don't want to keep your whole night.
No, it's okay.
I would love to hear, and I'm sure if you'll have me back, we'll be back to talk about something else.
Oh yeah, you can come on mine. I can come on your podcast anytime.
Yeah, I could do this forever. Well, let's do this though. Tell me about the School of
the School of Psychic Studies. So more coincidences. So I'm living in a sea of coincidences. I'm in the UK. It's my boyfriend's birthday, and he wants to go and see Iron Man 2. Yeah, that was my feeling too. Now, I love Iron Man, but not enough to pay what was £40, which is about, at the time, $60
Why
was how much.
Like that?
Because it's the price of going to see a movie at the theater in Leicester Square.
Oh my God, you could be so disappointed.
I was like, please don't say it's going to cost this much to go and see Iron Man 2. It's just not my choice of how at the time I wanted to spend my time. So I'm in Leicester Square, and we go see Iron Man 2. And they go, and I pay. So I pay this money because, of course, I'm going to give him what he wants for his birthday to see Iron Man 2. Sigh. Hashtag sigh. And they go casually. They very casually go, and it's got subtitles on it. All right? And we go, no. Why does it have subtitles? And it's this thing they do much more, I guess, whether it's this theater in England. They're like, well, we have deaf people come in. And I'm like, yes, of course, that's great. But then don't you just have certain ones? But their thing was we put subtitles on most of our screenings, which just for me seemed a little out of balance. Like I would think you would go and see the occasional one with subtitles, but it was the opposite.
So you want to know how many people are actually
I'm like, that is like just not what I would have expected. That's all. But great for the deaf people that they can go and have subtitled Iron Man 2. So we decide, my boyfriend goes, no, I don't want to watch it with subtitles. So I'm thinking, thank God. But he goes, let's just see the later show. And I'm like, I'm still not out of Iron Man 2. So we have 2 hours to kill. So we go wandering, and we happen upon this famous bookshop called Watkins in London. And it's been around since like 1880 odd. It's this really famous metaphysical bookshop. Really cool, like insanely cool. And I'm seeking desperately research on everything. Psychic people, by the way, had been coming up to me like no man's
like
business. recognizing something. Psychic people were coming up consistently going, hey, you have psychic ability looming over you and you need to learn how to use it because it's very dense. It's hanging over you. Like they described it as silver suitcases and you need to unpack them. So I was really trying to, and I was told this by multiple people. So I'm like, okay, I got to try and learn about this stuff. I asked this famous bookshop, and I get there at 10. I'm like, look, I had a near-death experience. Crazy stuff's happening. I'm struck psychic. I can answer questions from people. I see images, blah, blah, blah. What do I do? And they're like, oh, you need to go check out the College of Psychic Studies. So they give me this brochure, a beautiful brochure. And I end up studying for a year at the College of Psychic Studies. And that was really amazing. I mean, it's almost like a pod in itself.
Right.
Because I was taught, the first one, I went like to the beginner one of how you deal with psychic energy and stuff. And what I discovered was like, I could do it right off the bat. Like people, you're in this program to like learn how to say, give a psychic reading. I could do it on day one. Like we did these exercises in class, and one of the first ones we did was with paper and smoke. So the teacher had all these tools which you would know all about, like pictures and cards and stuff. He chucked a load of Xerox paper on the floor, a big stack of it, and it had all been smoked with a candle, randomly just wiggling a candle around underneath to make wobbly smoke patterns. Everybody just picked one of the papers, you partnered up, handed the other person the paper, and they would do a reading. So it sounds very bizarre. But I'm sat with my partner like you would give me your paper, and I look at the smoke, and straight away, images are jumping out at me from these random patterns of smoke. I'm seeing dancing, I'm seeing teaching children, blah, blah, blah. And you're not allowed to ask them questions, of course. You have to just start speaking for like 20 minutes. And I just look at the smoke, and I keep speaking of all the things. And the teacher comes over, and the girl's just going like, yes, that's exactly right. Yes. And everything I was seeing, like even I saw the dancing figures. She was like, in her 50s, and she like, I just took up dancing. It's something I wanted to do my whole life. But loads and loads of information. And, that was just one of the things, but I was able to do it very easily at the College of Psychic Studies, and we would do a lot of meditating. And one time, as I said, I'm not a ghosty person, but this one time I went to class, and he said, we're going to do mediumship today. Mm-hmm. And I was a little bit freaked out. I'm like, oh, that's going to involve ghosts, and I'm not like a ghosty girl like Karen. And her demonologist, right? I don't have one of those.
Him. He's the most positive person in the
world.
I'm
sure I would. But I was like very hesitant. Anyway, we did the mediumship, and of course I get like the stuff happening immediately. It's all right. I should disclose, I had like a little, an injury, in July.
Which means I'll be back.
I had a concussion, and I just am starting my threshold now. I have a very hard time concentrating, after a certain period of conversation, and I'm just aware of it. So I'll just finish up on this if it's okay. Literally my mind kind of suddenly goes weird. So we did the mediumship. And I'm sat, you just meditate and you sit, and the girl sat across from me, and, you just literally meditate and basically say, I want somebody to come to give information to this person across from me that will be helpful to them, and I'm like extremely nervous. I felt this weight come into my legs, a huge weight. And I felt my hands suddenly felt like they weighed 20 pounds. And I couldn't lift my own hands off of my thighs, which was a little bit freaky. And I started to, in my mind's eye this time, see, because when I had my experience, I really saw this stuff, but this was in my mind's eye now. I could see a fat guy's belly, an old-fashioned belly where they would have those pinstripe shirts, like you would see maybe like, I don't know, just what we consider old-fashioned times, when it's like guys wore suspenders and wore those metal things to hold their shirt sleeves up. That was the feeling I had. I was in that time period, and these hands were so heavy, and I couldn't lift my head up. I was staring at my hands, almost like I was in shame, and I couldn't lift my head up. And the girl, I'm telling her this, I'm saying, you have to describe what you're feeling. And I'm like, my hands are so heavy. I feel they're a man's hands, because I see a beer belly in front of me with this pinstripe shirt with the buttons pulling. It's very blue collar. This isn't an expensive shirt. My hands are very worn, and they're so big and heavy. And I can't look at you. I said, I can't lift my head up and look at you. And she started to get upset, and she goes, my uncle, it was like either an uncle or a granduncle, had basically run off with the family's money. But he used to build. He was one of those guys who would build up, they called them like a steeplejack, where you'd climb and build the bridges and be moving steer girders and stuff. And she said he had huge hands from his work. And he used to, he had these shirts, and he had a big belly, and he he disappeared. He robbed the family of the money that was supposed to go to this girl and her family. And the man had robbed it, this family member, which, as I say, this is going back years as I'd remember exactly the relative. But it was very accurate to her. It made sense to her. And she said, and I was confused, didn't make sense to me. I was just reporting what I felt. And I said, but I can't lift my head and I can't look you in the eye. And she said, he would be so full of shame because of what he did, you know. So that's a good wrap-up point for me because I've got all my
I have two synchronicities to wrap this up with until the next time I come over and push your tape. I just had someone else describe mediumship the same way, heavy, didn't like it at all. But here's the weird one. Some people keep telling me to get off the tarot cards and just work psychically. And I have started that. And the other day in yoga, I see my energy and I'm like, why is there glitter in my energy? And you said silver suitcases.
Yeah. Oh, see, maybe you've got stuff that needs to be unpacked still.
I got plenty that needs to be unpacked. Natalie Gray, you're amazing. Tell everybody where they can find your podcast.
Oh, it's The Gray Escape. My name is spelled Gray with an A. The Gray Escape with Natalie Gray. And you can find it on iTunes or pretty much any of those streaming services. But I always plug iTunes just because it's what I use. And I also have a companion website, thegrayescape.com, where I post links for my guests and stuff. But my guests, I'm very, very humbled and privileged with the guests I've had on, sound scientists, experts in strange things, like a guy who's done ayahuasca 400 times.
As I am humbled to have you on my show.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Thank you, Natalie, and welcome back to LA.
Thank you so much, Karen.